Welcome to the Today's Leader podcast, building tomorrow's best leaders today. Today we're talking entrepreneurship and bootstrapping, and it's my pleasure to welcome the CEO of GreenPal, Bryan Clayton, to the podcast. How are you, Bryan?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on your show.
You've got a fascinating story of success. You built a couple of different businesses. So share with the audience the Bryan Clayton story.
Yeah, so currently I am CEO, co-founder of a company called GreenPal. And so in the United States, GreenPal is an app that works like Uber, but for lawn mowing services. So if you're a homeowner, need to get your lawn mowed, rather than calling around on Craigslist or Facebook or something like that, you would just download our app, pop your address in, and somebody comes out and takes care of it for you. Been at this business, I guess you could say we're a 9-year overnight success. It's taken us almost a decade to get where we are, but we're nationwide in the United States, around 300,000 people using the app to get this chore done, and doing over $20 million a year in revenue. So we've just kind of kept our heads down, working hard on this thing, and have self-funded it along the way, haven't taken on any outside capital, and grown the team to around 40 people now. And I guess one of our keys to success is just focusing on this one thing for a long period of time, making it quicker, faster, cheaper, easier, and not really getting distracted by a bunch of other things, just focusing on the lawn mowing and landscaping space. Before GreenPal, I actually had a landscaping business. I started mowing grass in high school as a way to make extra cash. My dad forced me to mow my first yard, and luckily he did, and I stuck with that lawn mowing company all through high school, all through college, and over a 15-year period of time, built one of the largest landscaping companies in the southeastern United States. Got it over 150 people, over $10 million a year in revenue. And in 2013, sold that company. And then I got retired for a little bit, got bored, and decided, okay, well maybe I can build the app that makes this whole thing run smoother. And it was kind of naivete as an asset. I didn't know what I didn't know. And luckily, I didn't know how hard it was going to be, or else I never would have tried it. But recruited 2 co-founders, and we never looked back. So it's 20 years, one industry. I've seen it on the blue-collar side and on the tech side.
It's a fascinating story, and so many small business owners that I work with are really strapped for cash, in one of another word. And often when we talk to them, one of the first things they'll talk about is, how do I get more money? How do I get government grants? How do I do this? How do I do that? So the concept of bootstrapping is one that is absolutely relevant to the market base. So when we talk about, and especially when it comes to marketing, Bryan, I'm really intrigued as to how you market when funds are tight.
Yeah, necessity is the mother of invention, and a lot of times funding the business off of its own revenues can kind of keep you honest almost. It can kind of keep you focused on the things that matter. It can keep you focused on only a couple of things at a time. So as hard as it sounds and as hard as it seems, it's happening not to you but for you. It's keeping you focused on the customers, keeping you focused on solving their problems. It's keeping you focused on building a solution that they want to use and keep using. Whereas if you go and take on a $500,000 government grant or go raise funds from investors, a lot of times that can almost in a weird way have you focus on the things that don't matter. So for me, 20 years in business and funding my businesses off their own revenue, it kind of crystallizes your thinking and forces you to listen to your customers, to solicit their feedback, to solicit their advice on where you can improve. And in a weird way, it reinforces your success. And so that's been my philosophy, although it's hard. In many ways, it's the harder path, but it can help you build a sustainable business that stands the test of time. Now, there's some ideas that, like let's say 4 or 5 years ago when people were starting all these scooter companies, you couldn't start a scooter company without a bunch of cash. So there's some ideas that you have to have a bunch of capital up front just to even get into the game. But the reality is most projects don't. And you're much better off funding them off of their own revenues than trying to go raise a bunch of money.
Yeah, and in many ways the startup world, especially the tech startup world, seems really focused on that concept of creating something that's of value to the investor as opposed to what I fundamentally see of value to the customer. And in many ways, that coming out from outside the tech world to start what predominantly is a tech business in GreenPal, served you well because you weren't tuned in or aligned to much of that thinking, I would imagine.
It was nice to be kind of outside of the echo chamber that we have in the United States and on the West Coast. You know, I come from Nashville, Tennessee, so we don't have a big, deep pool of investor capital going towards tech startups. So that kind of almost, in a way, helped me succeed in a weird way. And you know, a lot of times if you set off to start down this chain reaction of events of raising capital, you get good at building a pitch deck, you get good at building something that investors love, but you don't necessarily get good at building something that customers love. And so in a weird way, you know, raising capital can almost decrease your chances of success. And you know, most huge tech successes have raised venture capital and deployed it correctly, but there's more sad stories than there are good stories. And so my philosophy is that raising capital and moving too quickly and building a product that investors love rather than focusing on your customer is usually a bad bet for most founders. And so for me, you know, luckily I was able to kind of go the slow and low approach and just focus on keeping customers happy, making as much money as we could, and growing that and reinvesting that capital versus constantly having to worry about raising my next round of funding. And you know, luckily that worked out for us because in 2013, 14, 15, and 16, there was kind of a gold rush of venture capital dollars funding these Uber for X ideas, Uber for home cleaning, Uber for laundry services, Uber for car washing, you name it, and pretty much all of them crashed and burned, whereas we just kind of kept our heads down, kept working. Hey, we have 100 customers. How do we get to 200? Celebrating the small wins and just focusing on incremental progress and doing it for a long time has now got us to where we have a profitable business growing 30, 40%, and we're in charge of our own destiny. There's only 3 names on our cap table, which is nice.
And anyone in business knows it's all about finally turning a profit. You know, ultimately that's what keeps businesses afloat, the ability to make a profit. And we see a lot in the tech startup space. It's more about followers. It's more about users. And many of these companies fundamentally don't make a profit for a long period of time, if ever. And they just, as I said, they seem to continually look to build something that they can on-sell, and that's how the founders make their money. So the question that's on, I'd imagine, a number of listeners' lips is, how do you start a business? How do you take an idea that you think you've got when you've got no money, right? And I think you may be the expert that can share how to do that.
Step one, one of my favorite quotes is a quote by Mark Cuban, and he says, the least amount of money you can live on, the greater your options. And as simple as that sounds, in the early days of starting a business, you are your business. Your personal finances are your business finances. You know, your personal burn rate is your business burn rate. So, I mean, I'll bet on the guy or gal that can live on $3,000 a month versus the one that has to have 10 or 15. And so take audit of what does it take for you to make ends meet, and how do you get that in order first. You know, maybe you have a car loan and you need to sell that car and go get a used car. Maybe you have an apartment, maybe you can live in something smaller. So whatever the least amount of money you can live on, the better, because every dime that your business makes, you're going to have to reinvest into the business. And so you might be accustomed to a 70 or 100K a year salary, but the reality is if you're starting a business and you're bootstrapping it, you're going to have to live on 25 or 30, maybe even less if possible. You know, maybe you get some roommates, maybe you move back in with mom or dad. And as crazy and humbling as all that sounds, that really is kind of what it takes to bootstrap one of these things. Now, if you've already built and sold a company for a bunch of money and you have investors throwing dollars at you, it might be a little different. But if you're trying to make yourself and you're trying to, you know, get your first win under your belt, in my experience, that's what it takes. So step one, take inventory of your personal burn, get that in check, live on as least amount as you can, because like Mark Cuban says, the least amount of money you can live on, the greater your options are going to be. And then step two, when you're starting your business, you know, you're going to have to think and act very, very small. It's going to be very small. It's going to be very focused. It's not going to be, the 7-figure, 10-figure business for a very long period of time. You might set a goal to only make $2,000 a month, and don't do or worry about anything until you can hit that goal. And then once you hit $2K a month, maybe you try to get it to 10, and so just incrementally focusing on every level of the game. And not worrying about any of this other stuff. The thing I see a lot of entrepreneurs get hung up on is like to use Super Mario Brothers as an example. There's 10 levels to the game, and they're on level 1, and they're worried about Bowser. You can't worry about Bowser. Like, that doesn't matter to you right now. You just got to get through level 1, and maybe that's 5 or 10K a month, and nothing else matters. And you might think, well, that's not a business, and I can't live on that. Well, let's just get to that level and get that done, and then move on to level 2. So it's a lot of it boils down to having a big, audacious goal, but then thinking and acting very, very small, particularly in the early days, and celebrating those wins, and then getting to the next level, and so on and so forth. The third thing would be making it really, really, really easy for your customers to speak to you, removing all of the friction for them to tell you their feedback. So you might put your cell phone number on the emails, the live chat on your website. You personally are answering on your cell phone. The phone calls ring your cell phone, and you might think, well, I don't want to do that. Well, the reality is until you have tens of thousands of customers, you need to be doing that, because those customers are going to tell you where you need to improve. They're going to tell you the things you need to be doing to keep them as a customer. And in those early days, that's table stakes, because you're trying to figure out, am I solving the right problem? Am I not? What do I need to do to build something that people want to continue to use? Because until you get that right, nothing else matters. And kind of dovetailing off that, the problem with raising capital is you try to pour money on top of something that's not working, and then you just waste the money. So those are some things that stand out for me, building 2 8-figure businesses with no money.
I'm curious to know, from your perspective, so for a small business, I fully understand, appreciate, answer the phone. You are the business fundamentally. In terms of perception to the market, with your experience, is it better for a small business owner, for example, to portray themselves as maybe bigger than what they are, or is it better for them to say, hey, this is me, you pick up the phone, you're going to be talking to me? So in your experience, is it better to be bigger than, portray yourself as bigger than what you are, or to be who you are?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and like everything, it relates to really what you're doing. So let's say you want to start a services company, you want to start a marketing company, a marketing agency. I think it can be a competitive advantage for your clientele to be speaking to you directly, and they know they are getting you, and they're getting your efforts, and they're getting that white glove service. And I think you can do that for as long as you can do that, and then worry about the next level of the game. And I think that can be the thing to get you from level 1 to level 2. So in that type of services-based business, I think it can definitely behoove you to let your clientele know that they're getting you, and they like that. And that's one thing that you can do different than your competitors. If you're starting a company like ours, in the early days, the fake it till you make it was very real. And the thing about like Uber, Amazon, these companies have taught consumers to expect perfection. And the reality is people don't want to use a crappy product. People don't want to use a small one-man shop product. So you really kind of have to be as good as Uber as you can, and close that gap between you and Uber, and make yourself look as big as Uber. And kind of feign that, particularly in the early days, or else people aren't going to take you seriously. They're not going to have the confidence to use the product. So the product's got to look good. It's got to be polished. It's got to be world class. And the good news is every year that goes by, that gets more and more attainable. With the technology that we have available to us now, you can build an Uber-like product without the hundreds of billions of dollars that it took Uber to build it. So if you're trying to create like that world-class experience, you almost need to be kind of like behind the curtain, but it's still you doing the work. It's still you answering the phone. It's still you doing the live support. And, in the early years, when I was doing all the customer support, we had an alias, if you will. It was a woman's profile because people are a lot nicer to a woman chat support agent than they are men, and so it was a female person that we just made up, and it was me, answering the tickets and talking to people. So I think it depends. If it's a service-based business, let it be known it's you. If you're trying to be one of the big dogs, then you need to kind of like spoof that a little bit, but still you need to be getting the insights and the learnings.
Good advice. What was the biggest challenge for you personally moving from a physical landscaping business into the tech world?
One of the things that caught me off guard was when you're running a traditional style business, there's kind of a known playbook. If you wanted to go start a new restaurant or start a dry cleaning shop or start a construction company or start a marketing consultancy, you're going to have to do better than your competitors. You're going to have to innovate in certain things. You're going to have to deliver and just flat out maybe even outwork your competitors. But the kind of playbook is known, and there's also a known kind of like customer. Whereas if you're starting a technology-based business, for us, we were trying to build the app where you push a button and somebody comes and takes care of a chore for you. There's no known playbook. You're kind of on the outer edge of what people are doing, and while there might be other kind of parallels, in our case maybe Uber or Airbnb, nobody was doing what it is we were trying to do. So we kind of had to like make it up as we go, and so it's a lot more difficult to invent a brand new product that doesn't yet exist versus execute on kind of a known industry, a known business. And that was one thing that really caught me off guard. I didn't understand how difficult that was going to be. So about 10 times harder. And I thought it was going to be 10 times easier when I got started, but about 10 times harder to invent something from scratch that doesn't yet exist and kind of figure it out as you go.
So how did you teach yourself or how did your team work through the tech components? Was that something brand new to them all?
Yeah, it was brand new to all of us. Ideally, when you are starting a new technology-based business, there's a guy by the name of Paul Graham who is head of a startup or a head of an incubator called Y Combinator in the United States. And these guys are behind like big names like Airbnb and Instacart and Stripe and DoorDash, a bunch of big names. And so this dude's kind of a guru, and he says that when you're starting a new tech company, ideally you have a hacker and a hustler. So you have somebody who's just good at driving the business forward, the hustler, somebody who's good at sales, somebody who's not afraid to pick up the phone and call people. And then you got a hacker, somebody who's good at the tech side. Maybe they were tinkering on websites when they were 15 years old or something like that. Well, we had 3 hustlers. We didn't have a hacker, and we didn't know any hackers. And so we had to teach ourselves how to code, teach ourselves how to build software. We had to teach ourselves the hacker part, and that took a long time. It took about 2 years for us to get up to snuff and to learn the skills that we needed to learn. But we took every online class we could take. Watched everything on YouTube we could watch. My co-founder went to a boot camp where he learned back-end development, and I learned how to become a decent front-end developer, and that's kind of what it took. And looking back, we didn't know we were going to have to do that, but it's almost as silly as trying to start a restaurant with no chef. You got to have a chef, and somebody needs to know how to develop recipes and be good at that. And so we had to learn that.
One of the sharks, no doubt you've got the show called Shark Tank in America. I think that's where it originated from. We've got our Australian version, and one of the sharks on the show is a guy called Steve Baxter, who's part of my local business community down here, as well as a global community, of course. And he always talks about you've got to have a good, you've got to do the tech itself, and you've got to have tech on your team. So,
yeah.
And that's part of what he looks for when it does come to that investment model. That he doesn't want people subcontracting it out to tech houses, because that's when you start to lose control of your product. So
yeah, and the reality is you can't cycle quick enough. If you're constantly having to do a change order or call like this third party to shop to do one little thing or do a big thing, you won't make it. And we thought you could. In fact we tried that. We wasted like $150,000 with a development shop, and that did not work out, and it was a tough pill to swallow. But we learned the hard way that, hey, if we're going to be in the tech business, we're going to have to learn how to develop technology.
So tell me about your relationship with failures. So you've had 2 successful businesses, but along the way, I guess there's been the inevitable troughs that everyone faces. So walk me through how you personally deal with the concept of failure.
Yeah, I like the Bill Gates quote. He says, "Success is a lousy teacher," and it really is. And you really only learn from the things that don't work, and you course correct, and you figure out what does work by trying things that don't work. And startups fail all the time. New businesses fail all the time, and they fail more times than not. And so startups fail, but entrepreneurs don't. And so the entrepreneur learns from the failures. The entrepreneur keeps going, and, even when things aren't going well. And every entrepreneur has had this period of their life where it's like nothing's working. I owe employees and vendors $100K, and I've got $10K in the bank. My spouse hates me. My customers hate me. And so every entrepreneur's felt that. You just keep pushing forward, and it's kind of this weird, persistent flexibility, or flexible persistence, however you want to put it, where you just keep pushing forward. You're flexible. You learn from the failures, and you keep driving the business in the right direction. And for me, every major setback I've faced in 20 years of business, 5 years later, I was glad it happened. Particularly the 2008 crisis, the financial crisis we went through in the United States, almost killed my landscaping company, and I had to rebuild it from the inside out, and I had to take it down to the studs and rebuild it. And it was because I had to go through that was why I was able to get it sold for multiple 7 figures. And so, a lot of times these bad things you're going through, they're not happening, to you as the founder, they're happening for you. And in a weird way, more times than not, 5 years later, you're glad they happened.
That's a good way to think about it. It's not happening to you, it's happening for you. And to be able to look at those things as, it must be very hard to look at it as a bit of a gift, but maybe that's what it is. It's a bit of a gift that's creating a bit more business.
It's so hard when it's happening, right? It's so hard when you go home and there's still fires. And it's hard to really reframe that, but that's one thing 20 years has taught me, is that you almost always are glad it happened about 5 years later in a strange way.
Yeah. So with the Great Resignation that they're talking about, especially in the United States, are you seeing more and more people moving into the startup world or starting their own businesses or providing their services or their expertise through a business model? Are you seeing that firsthand?
It's, to use an Australian term, I think it's going to be a boomerang. I really do, because the reality is that, there might be some people that this kind of catalyzed them taking the leap of faith and starting a business. But another Mark Cuban quote is, if you have to ask yourself if you're an entrepreneur, then you're not. Like, the entrepreneur already was starting working on this stuff. The entrepreneur was already hacking on it nights and weekends. The entrepreneur was already thinking about it in the shower, and it didn't wait for like a $1,500 check from the government, and that was the thing that caused them to quit their job. So my personal belief is that it's going to be the Great Boomerang. And maybe there might be a certain percentage of people that this was the thing that helped them kind of jump off the cliff. But the reality is that it's so hard to start a business from scratch that the little difference that COVID and all that stuff made is not the differentiator. It's not the difference. It's not the thing that separates somebody who just goes into the arena versus who doesn't. And so I think it's going to be the Great Boomerang, and we haven't seen any effects of it. I don't think we've lost anybody. When we have around 40 people. So I guess we've been lucky, and we're still small. But and we treat our people great, and they love working where we work, and they're all bought into the vision. So I guess when you're small, you're not subject to these things. But if you treat your people like crap, and you have hundreds or thousands of people, then yeah, I guess I can see where it would happen.
Yeah. I've got a couple of thoughts in relation to that as well, of course, and I see often that I'll get a phone call out of the blue from someone who's looking to leave their job and start the business. A business was always their passion, but they've sort of spent the last 20 years flying under the radar in either a corporate or a government role, and that's a really big shift to make from flying under the radar, not trying to do anything wrong, and then moving out into your own business, of course. And then I've actually seen in my journey, so I started my business in 2013, and I've seen in my journey so many people have followed a similar path but are now back working in a corporate space. So,
yeah, and the reality is it's just so hard. You look at folks that make passive income. Even if it's like a TikToker that makes $10,000 a month, they work their ass off. I mean, they are creating content 7 days a week. I mean, they are putting in the hours. So even the people that seemingly have it easy with these online businesses always are working hard. Always. I mean, insanely hard. 2 or 3 times harder than your average salaried employee works. I guarantee it, 100% of the time.
I can just imagine the amount of work that goes into a TikTok video, and all we see is the end result.
Yeah, we see 10 seconds or whatever. I mean, I guarantee you those folks are putting in the hours, putting in the work, and it's a lot harder than it looks.
So what's the vision for yourself, Bryan? What happens next for you guys?
For me, I'm lucky. I've been at this project 10 years, and I haven't worked a day in my life. I mean, I've just been working on what I want to work on, and I think that's like, for me, a model of a fulfilled, successful life. It's just working on the things you want to work on. And GreenPal has been the thing I've wanted to work on for a decade, and I'm going to keep busting my butt on it and leading the team as long as I'm having fun. And we're doing 20-something million a year now. We got to get it to 100 million, and really that's the big goal: is how do we get this thing over 100 million in revenue? And that's really what we're focused on. And I think every company has 3 phases. There's like the startup, and then there's the grow up, and then there's the scale up. And I think I'm good at the first 2. And once we reach the scale up phase, I'll try that out. And if I'm not good at it, then I'll put a professional CEO in place. But I'm going to keep running this business as long as I'm having fun doing it.
Absolutely. Dan, just thinking about your business, I guess from a perspective of growth, you've had to get contractors on board so that they're in the system, so that you've got people that are providing quotes, I'm imagining, and then you've got to get the consumer on board to know that it's a trusted platform. It wouldn't be much of a platform if a consumer said, I need my yard mowed, and there's no contractors to actually put in for that job.
That's right.
So it's a double-faceted marketing aspect as well.
That's right. Yeah, it is very much the chicken and egg problem. We really kind of have 2 customers, and for us, we have to strike that delicate balance between buyers and sellers and make sure that it's not a ghost town. When a homeowner comes on, they should be able to get 4 or 5 quotes back in less than a minute. Then they should all have reviews, and they should all be priced well, and then they can hire the person they want to work with. But if they sign up and nobody quotes their property for them, that's a big problem. And it's just like if you open the Uber app and there's no cars. And so we are constantly monitoring that on a city-by-city basis. In the early days, it was very much ad hoc. We'd have maybe 100 people sign up in a day, and we would look at every inquiry and make sure that they got the quotes that they needed. But now we have thousands and thousands per hour. But we're able to kind of manage the business better now in terms of, okay, we know that we're a little light in Wichita, Kansas, or San Diego, California, or something, and so we need to go recruit more vendors there. And in the early years, that was really, really tough because we didn't really have a name brand. We didn't have a reputation. But now, luckily, as time going on, we're a decade in, we have a waiting list in most markets for suppliers. And so now the thing is, okay, we can focus more on consumers, getting the word out, getting more consumers to sign up, and then just keep ping-ponging back and forth, making sure that we have a good balance on both sides. It's a challenge. It's a challenge for every marketplace that you have to kind of figure your way through.
And do you have churn with the vendors once they come on? Do some people think it's not for them or aren't getting the gigs that they thought that they would be getting?
Yeah, so we have a sweet spot of service provider. It's the person, the guy or gal that's just getting in the business, that maybe they're mowing 5 yards a week and they want to do 100. It's the best product in the world for them, because this is the thing, the operating system that gets them from 5 to 100 and gets them like over the hump, and then takes care of everything for them, from scheduling to getting paid on time to marketing automation, all these things. Where we don't have real resonance is if you've been in the business for 10 years, maybe you've got 10 employees, you've already got your systems, you've got your processes, you don't want to adopt something new. And so we don't have a real good value to those folks. But for people just getting started, or people really that want to make an extra $1,000 a week, it's the best product in the world. And we work our ass off to try to fill their schedules, try to fill their routes as much as we can, because that's really why we do what we do, is to help those folks out.
So, Bryan, who's inspired you in your journey, in your business journey?
You know, I think when you're looking for like mentors and things of that sort, it's important to look to people who have done what it is you're trying to do. And so I've tried to learn from other founders and other entrepreneurs who have built similar style businesses. So somebody who's inspired me, he's not a real well-liked character, but his name's Travis Kalanick, and he's the CEO founder of Uber. And he really had to will that company into existence, particularly in their early days, because those guys were fighting like taxi lobbies and local government cartels and all of these things. And they had to really kind of use the product to kind of batter their way through that. And I learned so much just watching how he operated in the early days, and how he built out a team, a world-class team, and how they operated. And that's really somebody I've taken a lot of inspiration from. And if you listen to talks that he does, you know, he talks about the grit that it takes, particularly in the early days, and how just difficult and challenging it is, and how it's like literally like eating glass, and you know eventually you love to come to taste of your own blood, and so that's something I really learned from him. And he really kind of helped me maintain my psychology in the early years, just watching talks that he's put on and interviews that he's given.
Yeah, being very dogmatic. I know some of the dramas that Uber created over here in the Australian market.
Yeah.
And just to continue to forge through was just a real visual thing that just about everyone could see. So
that's right.
You mentioned looking after your team. One of the concepts around the podcast is obviously today's leaders, and we're building tomorrow's best leaders today. What are some of the traits that you would expect to see in great leadership with any sort of business that are truly wanting to make a difference and hold on to their team and perform?
Yeah, you know, one of the best exercises in leadership you can ever do for your life is start a business, because it doesn't matter if you have 2 employees. You got to learn how to become a decent leader. You know, you can't be a jerk. You can't be somebody that nobody wants to work for, else you won't be able to keep employees. And so that was like a self kind of reflection process I had to go through in my first company. I remember I was driving to the office one day, and I didn't want to drive there. There was a lot of people that worked for me that I didn't like. They didn't like me. Yeah. It was just a negative vibe at the office, and it hit me. I was like, well, you created this. You built this. This is a reflection of you. So if everybody there is a jerk, it's because you're a jerk. And so that's one of the great things about starting a business, is that it's going to force you to level up as a leader, force you to learn decent leadership. And so for me, a couple of things that have stood out is you really got to care. Yeah, I mean, you can't fake it. You got to care about your people. You got to care about helping them get where they're trying to get in life, giving them the opportunities to level up, giving them the opportunities to grow, giving them the opportunities to make more money, giving them the opportunities to work hard and fulfill whatever it is they're trying to do. You got to really give a crap about that. And if you don't, it's going to be tough. And you really got to walk the walk. I mean, you got to be the first one in and the last one out. Nobody wants to work for somebody who's just only putting in 10 or 20 hours a week. I mean, there's just no way around that. It's just you really got to live it. You got to eat and breathe it. And it's not about values. Yeah, every company talks about values. It's about virtues. It's like, what are the things we are doing? Like if a customer is pissed off, you care about making sure that customer is happy, and you are figuring out ways to make that customer happy. It's your virtues, not the values. And so I think those are just some simple things that have stood out for me. You got to really care about your people, and you got to really walk the talk, and you got to really display it in your virtues, not your values.
So, out of everything that you've accomplished, Bryan, what's the one thing that you're most proud of?
I'm proud of a few things. One is the platform that my team and I have built. Thousands and thousands and thousands of small business owners get to use it and make material income and make a good revenue, like literally build a good business on top of our technology. And that's a lot of fun. We have a Facebook group that thousands of these folks are in, and they're always telling us, hey, thanks to GreenPal, I was able to buy a new mower, and now I don't have to push a mower anymore. I can ride. Awesome. Or I was able to put a down payment on a house or buy a new truck because the truck I had was leaking oil everywhere and was almost about to blow up. And so that's a lot of fun. That's probably the thing I'm most proud of in terms of a little bit of impact on the world. And that's why I get out of bed every morning is continually trying to make the platform better and better and better so these folks can make more money on top of it.
Excellent. Bryan, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you today. How can people connect with you?
Yeah, anybody that's in the United States doesn't want to mow your own yard, just download GreenPal in the App Store or Play Store. We will be in Australia probably in another year. And anybody who wants to hit me up, I spend most of my time on Instagram. You can reach me at Bryan M. Clayton. Just drop me a DM and a follow there.
Excellent. Bryan, thank you so much for your time and your investment in today's leaders.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I enjoyed it.